I really enjoy watching movies. Two of the most favorite movies I've seen is The Longest Day and Saving Private Ryan. Both those movies were about the invasion of Europe called the D-Day. 1941, the World War had just really commenced. And the Axis were Germany, Italy, and Japan. And the Allies were Great Britain, France, US, Russia. Now, what Roosevelt soon realized, he realized if we're going to defeat the Germans, that we're probably going to have to cross the ocean, and then sometime we're going to have to actually invade France, because to get to Germany, obviously you had to go to France. So when Churchill, Stalin, and Roosevelt, the three leaders of the free world, they were always they had several conferences to plan out the plan of attack, because Roosevelt was the commander-in-chief. One of these conferences was in Casablanca in 1943. Now Roosevelt was there, Churchill was there, de Gaulle was there. Stalin, he couldn't make it. He was sort of busy in Russia fighting the Germans at Stalingrad and things like that. So they come up and they said, what can we do to defeat the Germans? They come up with two conclusions. One, unconditional surrender. That was the same thing that General Grant said to General Lee. And secondly, they got together and they figured out a plan to attack the mainland of Europe in charge of Operation Overlord. Now, the plan was to cross the English Channel at Normandy. But what they wanted the Germans to think, that they're coming to the port of Calais. Because if you look on a map, you'll see that the English Channel at the port of Calais is the closest crossing in the English Channel. So they figured that would be a good place to cross. So a huge plan of deception. In fact, they even created a false army with General Patton. As you realize, at that time, General Patton was sort of in hot water. And so Patton was in hot water, but the Germans still considered Patton as the U.S.'s leading general. So they actually created a fake army around Calais, things like that. And they also put out false radio broadcasts saying that they're going to attack at Calais. They also had secret agents, false radio broadcasts, and things like that. But the actual invasion was at Normandy. In fact, it went so well that when the invasion actually started, Hitler didn't believe that it was a real invasion, so he refused to release all his troops. That made it a lot easier for everybody. But D-Day was quite an event. There was thousands of ships, thousands of soldiers. And the D-Day invasion was on. And most people consider that the D-Day invasion actually lasted clear until August, and that was the liberation of Paris. Now, for this D-Day invasion to be successful, four things had to happen. Okay, the first thing had to happen was we had to have tremendous planning. I mean, just visualize this. You're going to have the paratroopers dropping out of the sky. You've got 4 or 5, 6 countries involved in this. You've got to coordinate the air, you've got to coordinate the land, you've got to coordinate the sea. Now just think about this. How many of you have ever had to plan for a wedding? I mean, think about that. A wedding lasts less than an hour, and look at all the planning that has to go involved in that. What color the bridesmaid dresses? Well, we can't wear green. Somebody can't wear yellow. We can't wear red. All right, what color are the invitations? What's going to be the font on the invitations? And so forth, and so forth, and so forth. And if you can imagine how much planning goes into a wedding, well, multiply that by about 10, 15, 20,000. That's how much planning would be involved in trying to coordinate this whole D-Day invasion. So it took a tremendous amount of planning. The second thing that we had, they didn't have much control over, was the weather. because you got to realize that the tide had to be correct, because what they're going to do, have all these ships coming in, and then you have the landing craft, and people have to get out of the landing crafts. Now, if it's extremely low tide, what's going to happen? Well, they could have, half a mile. They would have to cross the wet beaches and things like that. So there was only a certain time during the month of June when they had the tide was correct. And the other thing that was happening in June of 1944 was when they had, it was the worst storms they've ever had in the English Channel. In fact, the original invasion was scheduled for June 5th. But because the weather was so bad, they had to delay it one day. And if that wouldn't have worked, because of the tides, it had been at least 3 more weeks until the invasion would have taken place. And then after 1 million men were already out there, there's just no way they could have kept that secret. So thank goodness on June 6th, the weather broke and the invasion was able to take place. Now, the third thing that had to happen is that we had to control the air. Because obviously you do not want to be crossing the English Channel and have a bunch of guys shooting bullets at you. That wouldn't work. So we had to control the air if we wanted this to work. And finally, the fourth thing we had to control was the ocean. If you got to remember at this time is that if you read all these movies, you hear about the German U-boats. Well, they were a definite threat. So we did not want to send 1 million men and equipment clear across the Atlantic Ocean if the transport ships were going to get attacked by the submarines. So we had to control the sea. So those are before the D-Day invasion could happen. I say there's 4 things that had to happen. They all did. 1, it took the planning. That worked. 2, thank goodness the weather cooperated. 3, we were able to control the airspaces. And finally, we were able to get rid of the U-boats so that we were able to transport all those things across the Atlantic Ocean. And basically, those are the 4 things that helped the D-Day invasion be successful. Thank you.